Could you briefly introduce yourself, your role, and your discipline?
Sure. So my name is Anshu. Um, I'm an assistant professor of marketing here at UCD Smurfit. I've been here for about 3.5 years. So I mainly teach digital retailing to the MSc in marketing and retail innovation here at UCD. And I also teach a very innovative and hands-on module called Customer Experience Management, again to MSc in Marketing and Retail. I am also the program director for MSc in Marketing Retail Innovation. So we are always trying to learn what active learning techniques we could introduce to different modules where students get to learn in a very hands-on way. So that's our goal, basically to engage students in learning and to do best that we can as teachers.
That's great. Thanks for letting me know that. It gives me a really good sense of your background.
Thank
And could you tell me about the module or modules you teach and the collaborative learning elements they include?
Sure. So in both my modules, that is digital retailing and customer experience management, I use a lot of case-based learning just because, cases are one of the best ways to teach students to put them in situations that are out in real world that gives them a really good understanding of what problems they would encounter in business world outside in industry. And a lot of my cases now, what I'm trying to use them in a way is that I ask the students to go through the case beforehand. That's a mandatory requirement that they have to read the case before coming to class. And what I do is I kind of go through theories and models, etc., frameworks which they could apply to this case. And I give them really huge worksheets where they actively apply these models to the case that they have read beforehand in groups. So I think that is one of the best techniques that I have learned over my years as a teacher. Case-based learning. I also use a lot of simulations nowadays that really simulate business problems like marketing analytics situations, etc., in a very real kind of way through these simulations. And there are a great form of experiential learning for students because it's a problem that is out there in the world. We have really cool simulations nowadays which are also able to get data, etc., from these companies. Of course, a lot of times these simulation tools mask the real companies, etc., but they simulate the real world data pretty well, and students can use these so any problem or these data sets, etc., and actually analyze it and come up with data-driven solutions to the problems that we are seeing in the real world outside.
That's lovely. And that sounds really interesting. I mean, the simulation part, I haven't had that in my modules, but I love that idea. And this is the reason I love hearing about the various modules and how they foster collaborative learning. I mean, it's such a vital part of student engagement. And I love your approach. That's great. And it makes me curious, what type of group work do you use? Is it like problem based or like team based?
So I use a couple of ways. So in my module in digital retailing that's starting this week actually, what I'll do is these students, they are divided into teams and they have to basically develop a business model for a business of their choice. They have to develop a website for this business. They have to attract, prospective customers to this website. They have to use Google Analytics week on week to monitor their traffic and to basically show me what marketing strategies they are applying in this, trimester to increase their cuts to increase their basically user traffic to the website. And if this business were to go live Sunday, how they would basically scope it out and enlarge it for the real world. So yes, I use project-based learning, but also very case-based learning where they come into class. They're not divided into groups beforehand, but they read the case, they come into classes, and they are divided into groups in class, and they apply different frameworks, say design thinking, right? Design thinking is something that you can't really teach with a textbook. You have to have hands-on experience. So they read the design thinking case for my customer experience management class before coming to the session. And in the session, I will walk through different steps, break the whole process down into different steps, and they will use their worksheets basically in groups and go through the whole process of design thinking and come up with a new product or new service that we are talking about in that particular class.
That's great. I love how diverse your methods are. And I can only imagine how each type of group works, adds a very unique dimension to the learning experience. So it's lovely that you use so many methods.
Yeah.
And
And I hope the
uh,
students enjoy it. So
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do enjoy it. You seem like a lovely professor, and your methods are great. And
thank
I'm
you.
just wondering, do you like incorporate peer learning activities like peer work or peer review?
So so a lot of my grading is based on projects or teamwork based learning. So the the project that I told you about for where these students have to actually develop a website for a business and track the traffic week on week using Google Analytics or whatever analytical tool they want to use. So it's a very project-based, peer-based learning. But what I do is, in the end, they have to evaluate how each group has to evaluate how the other team members participated in it. And then I think it's up to the module coordinator or the teacher, literally, the lecturer, that to what extent they want to incorporate these peer reviews into their grading. So for instance, if things go wrong, and a lot of times things really go wrong in group work, you always have two different sides of the story. If the group can't get along, a lot of times you see these in peer reviews that they'll try to be very hostile to each other. So it really depends on the lecturer how you navigate these group dynamics.
Hmm. That's lovely. I mean, I think that peer review and pair work, it's like a great way to encourage student engagement. But sometimes, like you said, it can become hostile. But peer learning can actually, help develop students' critical thinking and collaboration skills if they use it in the right way.
Yes, so they can learn a lot from each other, which a lot of students do. They always do, in fact. So
Mhm.
in one of my cases, for instance, there's this case that comes from the railway network in India, right? And my aim always is what I do is I group students into teams that are very diverse. And always I ask them to do a one-page reflection about this case after the whole session is over, right? And always one theme that I see that crops up after every session year on year from this case is that students say that I really didn't know about this cultural aspect of services in India, which I learned only through my classmates. So without these diverse teams, that wouldn't have been possible.
Mhm.
So students can learn a tremendous deal from each other. And, as teachers, that's what we are, right? We are just facilitators of learning. So
Absolutely.
peer-based learning is great, and it can definitely contribute a lot to student learning if used in an optimal way.
I feel like you do a lot of reflective journaling uh, among students as well, apart from the modules. I feel like that.
Yes. So what I do in one of my modules is after every group-based, case-based learning in
Mhm.
class. So the case is divided into groups, they solve the case, and after the class, they have to submit a one-page reflection on what they learned in
Mhm.
this particular activity and case.
Mhm.
And I feel that's where students realize how much they learned from their peers. So yeah, these reflection
Absolutely.
activities could be great. in my
Mhm.
experience, they work out very well.
Lovely. So, did you feel that active and collaborative learning had impacted positively or negatively on your student learning, or in some other way? I mean, if so, how?
So in my experience, I would say 90% of the times it basically contributes in a very, very positive way. Students learn not only from the teacher, but a lot of the learning really happens in the classroom from their peers.
Mm.
So case-based learning, for instance, right? You get a lot of diverse viewpoints from all these students, and they build on, I always encourage them to build on each other's points. Or even if you're critically analyzing your peers' opinion, you have to analyze it in a very constructive manner. What could they have done better? So there, I would say peer-based learning is a great tool, and it almost always contributes positively. But yes, if you're using group-based project, especially, you have to be careful that the team dynamics is positive. A good way is checking in at regular intervals with the team. So if you have a project that is, say, one trimester long, right, it runs from January to, say, April. A good way is just checking in at least at the midpoint level, so somewhere in March, to see how the group is working internally and if they are basically progressing and building on each other's ideas, or if, you know, this the group dynamics is sometimes things can go wrong within the group projects. So that's where I think a lecturer needs to come in and reset the whole group dynamic.
Mhm. Absolutely. I think that's like a very insightful perspective, and it's very fascinating how your teaching method is. I think it really influences the students and the overall learning environment. So that's really great.
I'm glad you find that way. And as teachers, we also learn every year with each group, with
Mhm.
each batch. So yeah.
And did you like have any active and collaborative learning activities that worked particularly well in your experience?
So in my experience, some simulations can work really well depending
Mhm.
on how you use them, what kind of simulations you are able to get, etc. So for instance, last year I introduced a simulation which was based on search engine optimization.
Mhm.
And even the students who are not so engaged in class, suddenly, the whole class dynamic was very positive. Everybody was so engaged in this simulation. Students who never show up, who are not super engaged in class, they were participating to the fullest. So for instance, this simulation requires each student, it's encouraged that you complete the simulation 3 times to get the to get the best learning experience. But there were students who completed the simulation 36 times. So it just shows you that how interested they were, because they felt that they were learning something that is very important and practical to their workplace.
Mhm.
So yeah, simulations can be very helpful because you have these insights and data from real world, which are basically the exact replica of the real world, but in a very safe environment where you can learn, you can make mistakes and learn from your mistakes.
Absolutely. It's actually wonderful to hear about what's worked well for you. And it sounds like you found some very effective ways to, enhance student participation. So that's really great. I love that.
Thanks. I'm glad you feel that way.
So, amongst all the modules that you've taught, I mean, what tools, platforms, or resources do you think would help enhance the teaching and learning experience in active learning spaces?
So, in my experience, students need to find value in
Hmm.
whatever platform, whatever tool you're using, right? For instance, the simulation that I told you about for search engine optimization. Students played that simulation 36 times just because thought that they were deriving some kind of skill that would be super useful in the marketplace or in the workplace when they're going out to get a job. So simulations can be very helpful. Active learning, sorry, case-based learning can be very helpful. And then I think another approach could be very practical group projects. So I think these are, very fruitful avenues if you're going towards active learning and peer-based learning techniques. And yeah, I think, these are things which could be incorporated in a variety of different modules across, streams.
That sounds like a great recommendation. And so this actually, I'm thinking about the point that what kind of advice would you give to the future staff teaching in active and learning environments?
So for active learning, what my advice is that you have to be very well prepared as a teacher, as a lecturer. So for instance, there's this design thinking workshop in class that I do every year for customer experience management. The students don't realize how well prepared I am for it because, I have these, beyond these physical, tangible things like your worksheet, etc. I have worksheets, I have all these pens, etc. That's nothing. That's literally nothing. But I have read that case at least 10 times. I have worked through it in groups a couple of times with my classes. I have worked through it individually a couple of times because I have to, as a lecturer, you have to time each activity so that students have enough time to critically learn from it, think about it, reflect on it. But you have to also, of course, fit it in whatever allocated class time you have for that activity. So as a lecturer, you have to be very, very well prepared for active learning based teaching techniques because they require a lot of work from the lecturer. And yeah, a lot of times students don't realize the amount of work we put in before we enter the class with, all these techniques and tools that we can use.
I'm sure that advice will be very helpful to others, and you have a lot of hands-on experience in such dynamic environments. So I think it's very valuable. I think everyone can learn a lot from it.
Thanks, Ananya.
And thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights today. I mean, it's been a pleasure to, learn about your approach in active and collaborative learning. And I'm sure your experiences and advice will be like incredibly valuable to the students and the staff in these spaces.
Thanks, Ananya. I hope my advice and my tips are useful to staff, faculty, and students as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was great meeting you today, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Ananya. Bye.